It's been a while. Mike Yeadon, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Jerm, it's great to see your face and to be speaking to you. My wife and I, we watch pretty much all your interviews, so you're a really key guy for us.
Well, Mike, you have been a key guy for me, ironically. Let's just quickly go back, just a little bit of history here. I think you and I were introduced around late 2020 by our mutual friend, Rainer Filmish. Shame. Lots happened to him also, but a lot's happened since then.
Oh, my word. We've been through the washing machine and several PSYOP campaigns and jabs and whatever. But it's good to see that you're still smiling. One of the reasons we like to listen to you is that your voice is a good voice to listen to, and you can't help but smile very often, which is it's rare enough. So it's infectious too, as you can see.
Mike, I get that from Bob Moran. He said once upon a time that you must treat everything as if it's satire.
Yeah, there is something. I'm not any good at that kind of stuff, but I think I try to treat what's going on as lightly as I can, whilst not hiding from the seriousness. Because otherwise, you just become Dr. Doom, a depressed person. Somebody said to me the other day, if you hold strong negative feelings inside you without any release for them, it will corrode you. And I think that's probably true. And I've managed to not let that happen because I focus as much as I can on objective things. Doesn't bother me which particular actor is doing what particular thing. I don't get excited about individuals very much. Who cares whether Bill Gates is Bill Gates or somebody else? They'll be replaced periodically by other marionettes dangled in front of us. So, I try to stay focused on what's happening, to be clear about the sort of biggest risks, occasionally delving into detail to try and bolster the idea that I'm not completely mad, because a lot of people think I'm completely mad. My wife keeps me sane as well, and we're good at laughing. So, I'd like to follow your lead on that too. Life's a mixture of sort of horrible seriousness and absurd jollity at the same time. So I'm with Bob that it's absurd.
I remember when Rainer introduced us, and he said in his email to me, "There's a scientist. I really, really want to introduce you to him." And it got me thinking, Mike, is science dead?
Oh, no, it's a very good question. No, I wouldn't say it isn't dead, because doing science or looking at things scientifically is a process anyone can learn to do. And a friend of mine describes it as never pretending to know something that you don't. In a recent interview, I pointed out that we've got at least two kinds of knowledge, maybe more, but these two are very clear to me. Things you know because you've done them yourself. You've put your hands on them. You've wrestled with whatever the thing is. You may have fired a gun or planted a crop or whatever it is, cut some wood up. You know those things from experience. And then there's all the rest. Someone told you and you chose to believe them. And I've challenged people, and I've said that I've had to be honest with myself and accept that probably like 95%, maybe more, of what I think I know belongs to that second category. And I haven't got enough processing power to go and examine everything that's in there that I think is knowledge. But when I draw something that I didn't, out of the library of Mike's memory, and I'm trying to apply it to some problem, I think, do you know that? Or was that a story which you've accepted uncritically? And that's one of our biggest problems. I recently came across the phrase preferred reality? I think it's preferred reality. It's a NATO phrase. And I saw it in the context of some disclosures that NATO had essentially been running the EU, or large numbers of countries we would think of as in Europe. And they were given instructions to say this is a public health emergency, but it's going to be run as if it was a military op. It requires these kind of capabilities. And we're going to tell you what you need to tell the people. And we've all got to do the same kind of thing, just to keep the story straight. I mean, they said it's for good reasons, but they use the phrase repeatedly. When we tell you these things and you're to tell your population these things, it's to impose our preferred reality. And I thought, God, that's the difficulty I face when I speak to somebody who believes the narrative. They're living in a different plane somehow, because they may know 50 or 250 things that I know are lies. Or I've examined many of them and discovered that they're false, but they don't know that. And so when I pop in and say, things like, there wasn't a pandemic, just a lie about it, and a deliberately inappropriate diagnostic test to give the numbers. And then, unfortunately, people died in care homes and hospitals, and their deaths were attributed to this disease. And there's your pandemic. And they go, nonsense. I know lots of people who, whatever, I have people who worked in hospitals. They'd have told me if that was happening. But the thing is, the people in hospitals, I've heard from other people who worked in intensive care, who were not trained intensivists. They were like general medical staff, but they got assigned to these newly opened intensive care beds. And they came in, there's plastic sheets hanging from the ceiling. Everybody's gowned up with gloves and CBRN suits. They look at each other and they can see terror in the other staff's eyes, and they're signaling what to do next on the protocol, and then nipping out of the room again. So I'm sure when they came home, it was eerie. There were 12 people in the room, all silent, because they'd all been sedated, intubated, and ventilated. All I could hear was the hiss of the machines, and one by one, the heart tracers went off. Just imagine how terrifying that would be. We were doing all we could. We followed all the instructions, and they were just dying. When that person comes out and tells their partner or their friends, they're reinforcing the preferred reality. But in practice, none of those people should have been on ventilators. I don't know if I explained this last time. So I'm a research scientist, not a doctor, but I've worked in the field of respiratory for pretty much 40 years, just under 40 years. Yeah, 40 years this year. My PhD was in respiratory depression and opiates, so I just classify. So when we breathe in, our diaphragm is contracted, and so it falls downwards towards your abdomen, and we swing our chest muscles forward and upwards. And those two things together make your chest into a bellows. There's negative pressure between the inner wall of your chest and the outside of your lungs. And so as a result of that reduced pressure, air flies into your airway, through your open airway, all the way down. So here is my contention, Germans, for the listeners. No patient with an intact, unobstructed airway, so a hole all the way from the mouth down to the bottom of the lungs, and with an intact chest wall, they've not been crushed, shot, or stabbed, paralyzed, or hit on the head. So they're able to produce rhythmic respiratory movements, and the air will go in and out. No person like that should ever be sedated, intubated, and ventilated. Why? Because when you ventilate, you do it naturally. You produce that negative pressure, and the air flows in nicely and inflates your lungs gently, and then the reverse happens on exhalation. It's not true with a ventilator. With a ventilator, you're being blown up like a balloon. Now, it's not as gross as you heaving away on a birthday balloon, but that's what you have to do. You have to mount a considerable intratracheal pressure, the opening pressure, to begin to inflate your chest and lift your chest up against its weight. And keep pumping the air in until you've got whatever the required tidal volume is, which is usually 0.5 litre or so. And then when that machine goes off, then your chest collapses and out comes the air. Well, when you do that, it's an incredibly aggressive act on the human body. You're pumping it up, letting it collapse, pumping it up, letting it collapse. That's the reverse of your normal physiology for your entire life. That process of pressure and then collapse tends to produce lung injury. Eventually, water starts leaking out of damaged blood vessels, and you get an edematous lung. It's called atelectasis. Gradually, the most peripheral areas of your lungs start to fill with water, and what happens is the pressure required to ventilate you steadily rises and rises, and you are on a one-way ticket to death. So, and you need very skilled internists, they call it flying the patient, because they're monitoring the volume, the rate at which they inflate you, the pressure at end expiration. When you breathe out, you don't breathe out fully, right? If I breathe out, I can breathe out another litre easily. So you don't go to the bottom, but if you're lying on your back unconscious and the machine just goes off, your chest collapses. So you need to apply a positive end expiratory pressure. It's called PEEP. And that's adjusted by the intensivist. So there's multiple dials you're playing with. It's a very complicated machine that they cost, I don't know, tens of thousands of dollars, maybe hundreds of thousands. They're built by hand at the rate of a few a week in a couple of factories in Germany and Switzerland. So you could never have ordered 30,000. That's a joke. I knew that. I knew there weren't that many in inventory anywhere in the world, nor could they be provided this side of the following year. I know this. I've seen these. I've used them. So if you take a person who might be having a panic attack, maybe they have got a cough, and they're hyperventilating, their eyes are rolling in their head, their heart rate's thready and 200 or 150, and their blood gases are all over the place. You don't sedate, intubate, and ventilate, because they'll probably die, which is what happens in 95% of them. What you should do is calm them down, take a proper examination, tapping their chest, listening to their chest. It's auscultation, I think, and they use a stethoscope. And then after a while, they'll conclude this person is not injured, but they're clearly in a state of heightened anxiety. You might prescribe the lowest dose of an anxiolytic one time. It's amazing if you've ever had a panic attack, which I did as a 30-year-old. The tiniest dose of an anxiolytic just dissolves your anxiety, and 20 minutes later, you're looking at the ceiling and everybody looking at you. And you go, what? It's like, what? And they're going, are you all right? It's like, yeah. What's going on? It's like, well, you were off your head, Mike. You were crying, you were rolling around on the floor. You said you couldn't breathe. Anyway, so this is what happens when if you lose it and you're whatever, you get overwhelmed by events. Sometimes it can be fear or grief, or the television's told you could catch this virus and die. And people were rolling up at hospitals, and I think a lot of them were in a state of panic, that the people assessing them thought, oh my God, they've got COVID. Look at this, their heart's racing, can't calm their breathing down. They're telling me they can't breathe, they're short of air. Get them on the ventilator. What they should have done is take a proper history, if appropriate, the lowest dose of an anxiolytic, cup of tea, kindly hand on the arm. I'll come and see you late in 20 minutes, dear. And then, I'm feeling, and then if you're feeling a bit breathless, take a breath of this little mask. It's got like a little extra oxygen for you, and we'll come and check you again. I reckon 95% of the patients, 90% would have just gone home. But these people were recruited into a preferred reality. And I think initially, and I always thought this, I think initially most of the medical staff were also induced into this preferred reality and therefore went on unknowingly to kill their patients. I'm sure the senior pulmonologist damn well knew, because I knew as a non-doctor that this is wrong. I knew as a non-doctor this is wrong. People might say, this is crazy. Doesn't Mike know that these ventilators are life-saving? Yeah, of course they are, Jerm. If you've had a head injury or drug overdose, you're not breathing properly on your own, your normal respiratory rhythm is gone or thready, you don't get them on a ventilator, they're going to die. If they've had a chest injury, pneumothorax it's called, where you've got a rip in that chest wall. So you try and breathe in and air just goes in through the slit in your chest. So if you've been stabbed, you've got to cover that. You won't be able to breathe in. If you just leave it uncovered, you'll get this air whizzing in and out of your chest and you'll just die. So, yeah. And then if you want planned surgery, I think most people who have complex coronary bypass probably go on a ventilator, or at least it's available for them during the 24 hours of recovery. Major surgery anywhere in the body that's going to take 8 hours, you're going to be so deeply sedated, they're probably going to be ventilating you. And then the last category I think of is people who've come in with such appalling injuries, like all 4 long bones broken, after a fall, a parachute accident, or they've been burned, a third of their body is burned, 2nd or 3rd degree. And the only thing you can do is sort of to try and relieve them of pain if you deeply sedate them, and then you might put them on a ventilator until they can be assessed and so on. Other than that, and don't take walk-in patients who've got an unblocked airway and an attacked chest wall. You don't sedate, intubate, and ventilator. Ladies and gentlemen, in every hospital, every major hospital in every country in the West, that's what happened to your relatives when they went in. So that's part of the fraud. And I only referred to because, Joan, we were talking about a new phrase for me that I learned from someone who'd been reading the NATO population control handbook or whatever. It wasn't called that, but they were describing instructions given to ministers of all of the major countries. You may find a video of, I think it's the defense minister or the home secretary of the Dutch government, and the lady is at the microphone saying, I didn't want to have to do the things I had to do, but it was for the best, and I didn't feel good about it. So what the NATO people had said was, this is a major emergency. We need to run it like a military op. We need to impose on the population our preferred reality. And the reason I stuck in my mind, I think I only read it a day or so ago, is, my God, that's where your friends and family and relatives that you can't reach, they're in this preferred reality that was imposed on them through the media and through governments and these screens and everything. I escaped it because by at most late spring 2020, I just thought, hell, pox in all your houses, and I turned off all news media, including alternative news media, because I concluded quite quickly that a lot of those, voluntarily or not, weren't really on our side. They were revealing some information that was true. They generally didn't lie, but they would hang back on, for example, no one would have told you what I just did. No one medical would tell you that. So that people ended up in a reinforced preferred reality. If they escaped the A grade, which is watching the BBC or Reuters, if they escaped from that because they were suspicious, they fell into the net of the level 1 alternatives, who were not lying to them mostly, but they were not telling them the whole truth. And only the few people, difficult people like you and me, just thought, this doesn't make any sense. I'm going to go and explore. We jumped out of the basket, and I don't know how far you fall, but there's another level, which is, what's his name? David A. Hughes, who's an international relations scholar, or was, before he left university, professor position. He was interviewed by James Delingpole recently, and he was describing the rather depressing third category. And I think James, at this point, quipped, it's a small club and there's hardly anybody in it. That made me laugh. It was a typical Delingpoleism, because that's the point. You get to the point where you realise you can't trust any kind of large-scale media organisation, whether it's one that was established before or what. Basically, once it's got money swirling through it and lots of staff, I struggle to think how you would avoid being infiltrated and controlled at some point. People would just come in and say, it's a nice studio you've got here. It'd be a shame if anything were to happen to it. Or the same about your family or your job. And quite quickly, I think people will just do what they're told. And the only ones who won't, they're in this third category. It's not a very big category. But the good thing is, I think it includes whatever percentage of the world population knows they've been lied to, that we're fellow men and women with them.
I don't know if you remember, a few years ago, you and Matthias Desmet both appeared alongside each other on my show. And Matthias has spoken about the number. He generally refers to about 30% or around about a third of all people at any given time can see through it. And I've often wondered, Mike, why us? Why are we part of that third?
My bet is it'll be something about your nature and nurture and upbringing. It'll be something inherent in each of us, and then something about upbringing. So my by nature, and people often got me wrong on this in my career, and when it happens, I always used to smile, because they see me as mild-mannered, pretty gentle, easygoing, cooperative and so on. And they thought, well, we don't need to pay any attention to what he thinks, when they're working on whatever their Machiavellian plan was. But later, when basically they trod over one of my red lines, and I just literally would not move, to the point that this project ends here if you're going to insist on that, or this is the end of this company. I'm not going to raise money if these are the terms. Oh crikey! And when I get to one of those points, I am incredibly stubborn. Just a tiny family story. I must have been like this when I was tiny, because my two sisters are both older than me. So when I was like 6 or 8, they would be much more powerful than me. And I remember at the weekends quite often we'd be wrestling, in front of the TV or whatever. Maybe All In Wrestling was on the TV at the time. My dad was a fan, and my sister would often get me in a chokehold. And my dad would say, you have to bang the floor or give in. And my dad said, Mike, give in, bang the floor. And I wouldn't. And he said, there was at least one occasion where you went blue and I had to go over, take the sister off you and more or less swing you upside down. I would not give in to the point of unconsciousness. I wasn't giving in. I know it's dumb, but I'm just trying to answer the question. So I think that's inherent in me. And then upbringing, I've always been just incredibly inquisitive. I'd be one of those annoying kids that would say, well, why is that then? How does that work? Well, why is that then? How do you know that? And I think I worked out quite early on that we don't know that much about anything, because even people you ask, they get to a point of irritation and they might snap, but then they would say, look, the honest truth is this is the best explanation I have of this. If you want more, you're going to have to go and ask an expert. And I'm like 10 or something. It's because it's not because I'm clever. I just keep saying, oh, that's interesting. How do you know that? And then they realize they don't know how they know that. So that combination of, I'm very cooperative, but not if it goes over my red line. If I get to Mr. Stubborn, there's no moving me because it's wrong. I'm not going to change until I know why I should move direction. And then, just a natural inquisitiveness, those things.
Let me play devil's advocate for a moment.
Yeah.
You spend the greater portion of your career in the pharmaceutical sort of lane.
Yes.
How did you not see anything then?
I think I must be naive. I'll tell you, I was aware that I think maybe there were 3 major criminal cases involving my employer. It was 2 or 3 anyway, because I worked for 2 or 3 large companies, Wellcome, then Glaxo Wellcome briefly, and then Pfizer. And so there were a number of cases where, Pfizer was fined, I think, $2.3 billion when $1 billion was a lot of money. Now, we weren't being fined in research for anything we in research had done wrong. The corporation was being fined for, we didn't quite know what. It's like mis-selling or hiding safety information, hiding lack of safety information. And I think naively, I never attributed it to the company, but say over-keen sales forces. Because I know there was one fine for, I think it's called, what is it called? Off-label promotion. So if you've got a drug and it's approved for a certain migraine headache, you can't start saying, oh, it's good for all headaches. If you've no data, you haven't got it approved with the FDA for all headaches, you are not allowed to imply or say that it's not just migraines, doctor, it's all headaches, something like tension headaches as well. So but you can imagine how easily a sales rep, I don't know whether they still exist, but they did in the 90s and noughties. You're visiting 5 doctors a day, you're trying to pitch this drug. That's how it worked. You try and persuade, not that I did this is what I understand, they would try and persuade the doctor to prescribe your product more often than the competition. You'd leave little mementos, little desk ornaments, a reminder, and you want to hit them with the key points. But you're not allowed to say things that aren't true, that are beyond what you've negotiated with FDA. But I bet you people just went a little bit over, like all the time. It's probably what they did. And I imagine there was a team leader and then a captain of all the team leaders that said, we need to push on Vioxx or Viagra this quarter, we're short. And people would know what that meant. It's like, just go a little bit, don't lie, but just hint. And I assumed eventually that it was, basically the Attorney General said, you guys have systematically and persistently failed to comply with what you agree with FDA. Fine, guilty. It's criminal. You're not allowed to do this. So I didn't know. I don't know for sure, but looking at what the corporation's done, knowing that the CEO is a respondent in various court cases, it's not, this person isn't, I'm not just managing the corporation. They know what's going on. They know that what's being shipped out of their organization were not vaccines. The people, Albert Bourla is a veterinarian, but he's a clever guy. He's been in applied science for decades. I always say to people, he knows what I know, right? I've never had to use anything more than basic knowledge in my field, like the ventilation stuff. If you were to have lectures on how to ventilate a person, it'd probably be in the first chapter. All this stuff, how lungs work, why ventilation is necessary but inherently dangerous. So you have to watch out for these things, and then we'll get into the practice. So there's no possibility that he doesn't know that if these injections did what they said on the tin, that is, there were a genetic code that made your body form a protein according to that code, that it wouldn't trigger autoimmune attacks in every cell. He knows that. He's a clever guy. So whether that's what went out or not, he was the captain of the company that shipped tens of, billions probably, of doses of this material. Also, he knows that you cannot, the expression, politically incorrect expression, you can't make a baby in 1 month with 9 women. My head of chemistry used to use that expression because it's one of the better ones, you see. And they said, oh, you can't say that. He says, well, come up with a better analogy then. Anyway, so the thing is, it doesn't matter how much resource you throw at the process of development and manufacturing of a complex product. It can't be done in 10 months, whatever it was. A friend who worked his whole life in manufacturing quality, the tests for evaluating whether you've made at each step what you intended to make and what the impurities are before and after purification. Each step has to have all of those tests validated. So you have to check that things don't interfere with them, that they're precise and reproducible, and you negotiate with the regulator and you show them what they're doing, and they go, that looks a reasonable protocol, or we don't think you should use gas chromatography because of their very large molecular weight species. You should use, or in addition, mass spectrometry or something. It's a negotiation. And he said the manufacturing methods validation and agreement with the regulators would take between 1 and 2 years. That's just for the measurements, what tests you do, and then how to show that those tests are being done properly and capable of telling you, steering you through the manufacturing process so that you can believe quality control at the end. He said 1 to 2 years. Well, they had a few weeks. So I know they did not do what they said. You can't do it in 10 months. And they didn't do. When you develop a drug, you make a small amount, you do some initial animal toxicology or whatever test you're going to do in test tubes. If that's okay, you make a bit more, and then maybe you'll dose your animals for what's called regulatory tox. So you might dose them for 3 months, something like that. You might make various measurements. That process alone that I've just described is way more than a year's worth of work. Even if you go to the most professional contract research outlets, I know I did it as recently as 2016 as CEO of a biotech. I had to negotiate these with my colleagues. You can't do, so that's just the tox. And then phase 1, you have to do single dose escalation in healthy volunteers. We would reckon that entire process of getting ethics approval, getting the protocol, getting ethics approval, either recruiting centres, they might be hospitals, or if you had an in-house unit, you might do it in-house, and then doing the dosing, getting all the measurements, you're looking at safety, toleration, pharmacokinetics, and writing that up. That alone is about a year in big pharma with its pedal to the metal, right? I know that. So could you shorten it? Yeah, you could probably shorten that even to 3 months, but you haven't got 3 months. I've just told you need 1 to 2 years just for the manufacturing method. So I knew, ladies and gentlemen, and I maintain to this day, that what they've told you they have made is not possible in the time they made it. So either A, they made it before the event, which is not good, is it? If they made it before the event, then they've simulated the event or they've released something at you, which we could come back to. But neither of those are good, right? Or they didn't make what they said, but they jabbed 6 billion people. I'm not sure whether you should like either of those two things. You don't need to be highly sophisticated to know that what I just told you is true, it's verifiable. You could, if you've made some notes, you could go, even ask Grok or something, and it will tell you the same thing. What's the typical time to do X, Y, and Z? So I've told people I'm kind of almost bored with talking. Not that you can tell from this, but giving these interviews, I've nothing new to say. But it's obvious there wasn't a pandemic. I always refer to Dennis Rancor, who I think you've spoken to. Yeah, and he is one of the more scientific people. I'm capable of being a scientist, but I always say I'm trying to investigate a damn crime scene, not trying to write a paper. I'm just like an ordinary person. I'm just using what the skills and knowledge I've got. But Dennis is, in addition to that, is working with colleagues and painstakingly writing 100-page monographs, And so there was no pandemic. There's no hint of one. And the recent thing I say is that you can't declare a crisis unless there's a sign of a crisis somewhere beforehand, which you might not be able to see, but someone a level up might be able to see. So if someone's saying there's a forest fires coming towards your city, someone's got to smell smoke or see flames. If there's an imminent shark attack on a beach, someone's seen the fin. If there's a supposed pandemic coming, some people somewhere have got to have been ill in greater numbers and died. And when they didn't, anywhere. And then they said there was a crisis, and then they started dying. So no vaccines, no pandemic, and then it just gets worse from there.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, I was pretty much red-pilled after chatting to Denis. By the way, it's Denis with a silent S because he's Canadian and French.
Yes, Denis.
So you must sound fancied, Mike.
Well, I usually do both so that people can spell phonetically. But yeah, Denis Rancor.
But it's I'm also bored of talking about COVID and the mechanics of it. I mean, I agree with you completely, but it does create a framework for something that a previous guest of mine, Jessica Hockett, very funnily said. She said, I started looking at the New York hospital data in 2020, and I found myself asking if man actually landed on the moon.
That's excellent.
That's precisely... Yes, that's precisely my journey also.
Quite quickly you realise that, well, I'm not being told the truth here. I'm not being told the truth there. And I've listened to somebody else who sounds like he knows what he's doing, and he's revealed 2 other dirty, great lies. So it's like, well, what is true? And my general rule of thumb now, which has nearly got me into trouble, I'll try it with you. Anything that is of at least moderate importance, I know that's a bit of a fluffy one, but we know anything that's of at least moderate importance and that everyone's been told is a lie.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my
in inversion.
Yeah, my good friend Nick Hudson, he said something very similar. He said anything that's big is a lie.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember him saying that. Yeah, the Hudson conjecture. I think it was that anything that's declared as a global emergency that's only susceptible to global solutions and censors competing voices is a scam. I think that may have been roughly his first use of it, and it's just so beautiful because when you point it out to people, they would say, "Oh well, surely there must have been alternative voices." No, there weren't. You weren't allowed to have an alternative voice. Just immediately. You either comply or what are you, a conspiracy theorist? I'm a proud conspiracy realist now. But yeah, I get bored even of spotting them. I don't care what the shape of the world is either. I mean, that one is one where, does that mean Mike believes in flat Earth? Because
I always say that.
Because the shape of the world, I think, is apparent. Well, what they want you to believe is apparent. BBC even has a spinning globe as a logo. Like they used to anyway, BBC at the bottom. So it's of moderate importance at least, and everyone's been told. So by my own definition, it's a lie. But the thing is, the opposite of a sphere is not a flat plane. So I don't know what shape it is. It could be a Mobius strip. I don't know. It's not discernible.
Before we go any further, Mike, there's a strange humming or buzzing sound. Is it coming from your side?
I think it might be the fan. Yeah, it's the fan.
Oh, okay. All right, that's fine.
I wonder whether it's because I've got it sitting on a hard surface, and if I put it on 2 blocks to allow it to, it may be I'm suffocating its cooling capacity. Hold on. I've got it sitting on a box. I haven't got anything as sophisticated as a computer stand.
What the COVID era showed me, Mike, is the ability to question everything that we think we know, but it's an extremely uncomfortable process.
Yeah. Yeah, I find it less uncomfortable now because I've had years to be aware that the world isn't the way up I thought it was, and all the things in it. But I'm no longer frightened by it in any way. I think I was very upset by the end of 2020, and then I had my religious encounter in the middle of 2021, which was, I don't know, a belief that what I was doing was looking into the face of evil when I was speaking out, and that's why I was doing it. But on the other hand, it was important to do it, and really I was getting the spiritual equivalent of a kick up the backside, really. It was, here's a gift of courage and resilience, get on with it. So, and then since then I wouldn't say I found it particularly disturbing. A lot of people do though.
Yeah. Because I was about to ask you, knowing what you know now, and using the idiom "ignorance is bliss," would you go back to 2019?
Not if the situation that we are discussing was as it is. I wouldn't want to go back and be ignorant of it. I wouldn't mind going, if I could be in a time machine and go back to a time where this wasn't happening. Yeah, that would be great. But the thing is, I think what has gone forever probably for me is the sort of belief that, my fate is my own and it'll be what it'll be, which is quite a nice feeling in early retirement if you're, in reasonable health and comfortably or financially. It was a nice feeling to, it's almost like I've made it to the end of the race now. I can run if I want, but I'm not required to. And then I'll just sort of like meander on through and then be found one day in a workshop or something, with a bunch of carburetors half assembled. But then it's like, now I realise they really are after us. And I don't know whether we've got 3 months, 33 years. That's not nice. And also, I don't know whether you feel this, but living where I do in southern England and criticising the people I do, it does cross my mind occasionally that if I was in their shoes, I think I would have got rid of me quite a long time ago. And I did hear from someone who gets about Parliament, shall we say, that they were definitely discussing my name in the summer of 2020. Oh, they know who you are, right, Mike? That's sort of said like that. And they presumably discussed what to do. And there might have been some that were like keen to, let me add him, I'll take him out, knock him off the road in my, large car. They could follow me out next time I'm riding a motorbike and just run me off the road. Nobody would know. They could have. They don't have to pick me up in a black windowed Suburban and do horrible things to me, although they could do that if they wanted to. But I just wonder, I don't know, it makes me think they just don't care. I don't want to be murdered or arrested, but the fact that I'm allowed to move around freely means, I think, Jim, honestly, they believe they've got me sufficiently circled that I'm not a problem. Because if I was, and if I was them, I would have done something. So that, I think, is a reasonably logical conclusion, that they're not worried. What I'm doing is not bothering them, which is a bit depressing.
Mike, I'm sorry for this interruption, but that sound is coming through like a motorbike in my earphones.
I know, I can hear it. Do you want to? Should we take a break and then?
Why do you think it's so difficult for scientists to rethink what they think they know?
Yeah, I think that's not too difficult to answer. If you're honest, when you do your as it were, your best work, as when I was a CEO of a biotech. And what do you think, Dr. Yeadon? When I'm pontificating, I'm saying only a few sentences, but it rests on like 30 years of thinking and experimental work and reading. Yes, so if a scientist is then challenged to say, excuse me, I think quite a few of those foundational pieces, like that one there and those right at the bottom, I don't think they're correct. I think people are well aware that if they go fussing around down there with a crowbar and a pneumatic drill, the whole thing's going to go over. It's like they're aware that if it is true what you've said, that these foundational pieces are wrong, then it doesn't take them long to realize that everything that rests on top of that is potentially null and void. And I think a lot of people are not willing to do the work. So it's like, this guy could be right, but it's just like far too inconvenient. So just in case he's right, I'm going to ignore it. I think it's because of the way you operate. It would be like being told as a sportsman that your training regime has always been wrong, but you've been doing it for like 10 years. You'd know that you would not be able to undo the effects of that training that you've adhered to for 10 years. So you don't want to know. You don't want to be told at this point. You are where you are in terms of physique and fitness and so on. But there is another one. What was the other one? Yeah, I saw a YouTube video maybe 4 years ago. I've not been back to it, and I think it was called The Staircase of Disbelief, or it described something called The Staircase of Disbelief. And the ground floor that we stand on initially is the preferred reality. It's the imposed reality. The first step is something you're sure in your mind is a deviation from what you've been told. So in our case, you could speak to many English people and say, do you remember when we went to war with the Americans and invaded Iraq? And they go, yes. I'll say, do you remember in the weeks before that, we had various politicians coming on the television telling us that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction that he could unleash in 45 minutes. Do you remember, folks, the 45 minutes claim? And then I think a couple of days before Parliament was due to have a free vote, a dossier was submitted. I don't know that we saw this dossier, but apparently it had been put together by advisors to the politicians, so they're not military people. And it contains numerous claims that people said were just simply not true, including the 45 minutes claim. And so when you take people through that history, I'll say, so would you accept that our government lied to us through the television so that it could send men and materiel to Iraq, after which they killed about 1 million innocent men, women and children? And they don't know what to say at that point. It's like, that is what happened. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't justified in the terms they gave us. They lied. Our government lied to the House, lied to the public. The Prime Minister lied. The BBC lied every day. So I'll say, all I'm telling you is they're doing this again. That's all I'm telling you. They're doing that again. But people don't want to take. People, they know they could take that first step because they already know they disbelieve. They know that narrative. People joked about it, the dodgy dossier, they called it. So, but they won't put their damn foot on it, Jerm. That's the strange thing. And it's also like JFK, obviously happened when I was 3, so I don't really know anything about it. But the idea that this one gunman with one manually loading rifle did all of that. Everybody knows that's just nuts, isn't it? I don't know what happens, but I do know we were lied to because that was the official conclusion. And anybody who said otherwise was a conspiracy theorist.
9/11 too. That was a big one, and yet
9/11.
I didn't question it until like 2016 or something.
Oh God, I didn't. I only questioned it in the same way that Jessica Hockett said she started asking about numbers of people in New York hospital and then started asking if we'd gone to the moon. I realised that 9/11 must have been an inside job during early parts of 2020 because I rapidly realised that almost everything I looked at that was important wasn't true. So when you get a whole line of things are just not true. Then it makes you think, well, what else are they lying about? And it's like, well, pretty much everything. So, but I'll tell you what, it's only recently, I've never spent any time on 9/11. Why? Because I concluded that they must have destroyed them in some way. What does it matter to me how they did it? And then somebody said you should watch Judy Wood's Where Did the Towers Go? And I watched a bit of it and I thought, oh shit. Because what she did very elegantly is show you pictures, show you wreckage, just keep asking, where do the towers go? So you ask any person, if a 110-story steel frame building clad with masonry and so on, if you manage to allow it all to, let's say you could saw up all of the structural members and allow it to fall in a heap, right? Maybe you could hit the bits of masonry with really big sledgehammers. How big would the pile be on the floor at the bottom? And they reason for a bit and they go 10 floors. And I'll say, I don't know, but yeah, maybe a pile, a tenth. How big was the pile? And they go, I don't know. I'll say it was about a floor high, about a floor and a half high. And then they go, where did it go? And I go, exactly. So the only conclusion I drew from that scientifically, because I don't know how they did it, but I know they didn't do it using methods I understand. Because all methods I understand would have produced a socking great pile of waste, and it wasn't there. So and then here's the next thing. So something was used that we don't know about. I think you would be unwise to assume they ain't going to use that again, or have not already used it again. For example, as a child, I used to like reading. Sorry,
Hawaii.
Yes, I don't. Yeah, could be the same technology, a different manifestation. But when I was a kid, I used to read like strange tales, things that have happened in the world that are all grouped together in a book that makes you go, "Ooh, isn't that interesting?" And I remember reading one about what was thought to have been a meteorite, which in 1908 exploded over northern tundra of Russia. I think over a place called Tunguska. The 1908 Tunguska meteorite. And until a week ago, I thought that's what it was. Some sort of dirty snowball came in, obliquely blew up and flattened, I think, 8 million trees or 80 million trees. Even decades later, you could still see all these matchsticks, all these trees flattened over many miles. But then I was reading something else that said that it may be possible to use scalar waves in combination using more than one projector and create something that was described as an energy bottle. If you have three sets of scalar waves, you can form a three-dimensional shape that could contain energy of some kind. Most of us know that waves, if they impinge one on another, they can either amplify each other if they're in phase, and they can cancel each other if they're out of phase. Most people have seen that when they've been swimming, even you see it in water. It certainly happens with sound, and it will certainly happen with radio frequency and all sorts of other electromagnetic phenomena. And so the idea, I think, I have an bad O level in physics 40 years ago, but I think the idea was you have multiple machines that are producing these waves, and the point where they all intersect is a potentially controllable three-dimensional structure. And the idea was perhaps they were experimenting with this technology in the Northern Hemisphere in 1908, and that was the result of it. It seems possible, but we'll see.
But that's the beauty of the last few years, Mike, that it's opened up a whole world of thinking, of critical thinking that we previously didn't experience. Of course, many around us will just call us clowns, and they carry on believing everything that they are told. But I quite like the idea of thinking about stuff.
No, you probably saw me enjoying that move from it was probably a meteorite to it could have been something that humans did on Earth. Wow, it could be either of those, and it could be a third phenomenon. I don't know, but I basically widen the solution set by quite a lot. So I think Judy Wood's work is terrific, and it's an object lesson as well for us all.
Just adding to what you were saying earlier about that third camp. So Noam Chomsky once upon a time said something along the lines of one of the most powerful ways to control people is to create the set of parameters within which you will encourage fiery debate. And even within those parameters, people are arguing and disagreeing. Yeah. But it's outside of those parameters where a greater truth lies.
Yes.
And that's effectively what you're talking about.
It is. Exactly. That is exactly right. Yes, it's to create a controlled dichotomy and encourage vigorous debate inside that, so that the additional solutions, one of which is the truth, is not even touched on, and if it's raised, it's censored. And that is where we are. But there's a slow trickling. I think it is quite reassuring that even if I'm watching, videos about my hobby, old motorbikes, that quite often people are now putting comments, sarcastic comments like whatever. And, that's whatever. They realise we were lied to over the last 5 years, and they're not being censored now. They're not very precise comments, but whereas in the first year, people were very, very twitchy, or at least the platforms and the algorithms were very twitchy. You literally couldn't deviate from the proper narrative. And now it seems to have softened. My concern is that if people only after 5 or 6 years start to realize that one thing might have been told to them incorrectly, they haven't got very far, right? Just because we were told about bombing Iraq that may have been 2001 or something. I don't know.
Or Japan.
Or Japan. Absolutely, that was fascinating. So so there you go. You can be intellectually fairly sure that you've been lied to, but it doesn't change anything because the imposed preferred reality dominates. And so I fear that not very many people have got to the point of realizing that it's all an inversion, that it's not good enough just to say, well, I'm going to refuse the next kind of jabs. And it's like, at that point, there might be nothing in the shops and only digital money. So have you thought about that, and have you planned for that? Because if not, you'll either starve or get jabbed. So people don't think very far down the road.
No. Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. So let's just say you have woken up, so to speak. What now?
Yeah. Well, I won't give away the details of my planning because it's not very sophisticated. But I've taken certain steps that means that unless they come out and arrest us en masse, it won't matter what they do next, because I've got certain provisions and means that means I'm not dependent on them for a decent period of time. But if they say you're not allowed to travel, and if you're seen outside, it'll be considered a breach of quarantine or whatever, then that would be very bad. But we're not going to starve or be immediately poor. I've taken steps to make sure that's very, very unlikely. But I don't think, I'm hoping more people wake up, that there'll be more people woken up by the time, that I do think more people are waking up. And I don't think it needs to be very many. If you imagine them wanting to impose a digital ID on everybody, and even if 5% wouldn't go along with it, in Britain that would be, I suppose that's 3.5 million people. And that's 70 million odd. So 5% is 3.5 million people. I don't know whether 5% would decline it, but we are already we're quite primed to reject it, because Tony Blair, early in his prime ministership in the 90s, tried really hard to impose it. And I think people realised that the very least we're going to be asked to account for our whereabouts and who we were when walking about peacefully. And we've never had that culture in Britain. It's not a papers, please society. And I think, so people have been, and we managed to fight him off, whatever, politically, journalists. So I think if they come at us again, I think it'd be quite difficult. And so if 5% rejected it, it doesn't really work. So if 5% reject it, some people then are going to be selling food on the black market. I'm going to be buying. That's the answer to the question. If it's so few that there's no black market, then the answer is I'm gonna pray and then I'm not taking it. I'd rather starve than I'm not going to use digital ID. I've said to people, oh, why don't you do that? You just don't have to be jabbed. It's like, I think that's the first step inside. I call it the human abattoir, or it's a digital panopticon, digital gulag, whatever it is. That you don't need a digital ID. You can already identify yourself in multiple ways to whomsoever needs it. So I keep saying to people, why do they want you to have it? And the answer is, it's not for you. It's for them to control everything about you. And they go, well, we've got loads of digital IDs. I said, you haven't got any that are updated in real time, which contains rich information about who you are, where you are, what you're trying to buy, what else you've bought recently, where you are geographically in relation to some 15-minute community boundary, whether you've said hurty words on the internet. All of these things can be instantly modified in your digital ID, and I think will do. That's what I always do. I always think, if I was the evils, what would I do? And that's what I would do. And they have warned us that you will be eating less meat. They have warned us that you won't be traveling by budget airline on holiday, and that, ladies, you won't be able to buy more than 3 items of clothing a year. My wife and daughter get that many through the door every day. They mostly take them back, but this is part of their living. They both of them like buying. They compare notes, they take things back. They do buy quite a lot. Use them for a bit more.
On the comment of meat, I go hunting, so they're not going to stop me.
No,
they're not going to stop somebody with guns.
Yeah, exactly. So if you've got access to the wild places where you may be able to secure something that you could cook and the means to take it down. Well, yeah, I don't probably, but I have started making friends with people who are in the butcher trade and in the farming trade. I had a really lovely meeting last weekend to go and meet. It's about 40 people. That it's like an informal farmers market, and they do a lot of it by barter. If there's any money, it's cash, and a lot of it is just pure barter, and also trust. I bought you £7 of beef last week. You brought me all these cherries this week, whatever. So they're all awake, and they knew who I was. So it's quite embarrassing just going into like a village hall, and there's all these people looking at you, like pointing at you. I just go, hello. So that was quite fun. So we started, because we didn't do any of that. We were too busy buzzing around the world. We went to Spain and Costa Rica and America and France, and so I didn't really. And then we moved house, so we don't know that many people. And so it occurred to me recently. I thought, we better start making some connections, because if they do impose some event, we won't know anybody, and we'll be eating baked beans until we run out of baked beans.
Hang on, Mike. You just mentioned a whole bunch of countries that you were traveling to. Have you been to my neck of the woods?
No, we didn't. I have to say, my wife is very keen on the idea. She does like the idea. The main impediment I have, and we both have really, is that both of our adult children, I think they're like late 20s, early 30s. Intellectually, they know quite well what's going on, but their lives are busy, and day to day, they just get on with their normal lives. One is raising 2 small children, the other's just bought a house and is going to be remodeling it. What else are you supposed to do? They're getting on with their lives. So they haven't given any thoughts really down the road. And when I've said, I think the only kind of places in which we would have a reasonable shot, not a guarantee, but a reasonable shot of a continuing free life would be either a place that we used to call third world, and you'd have to be on the rural end of that. And they just wrinkle their noses. It's like, what, no warm water and no mod cons. I said, pretty much, yeah, that would be pretty safe. Because if you're at the end,
it's not that bad.
No, I know, but I hadn't considered South Africa, because I think
I don't shower in, Mike. I don't shower in cold water.
Well, the point is, I think of it as first world, and so I think, why aren't you almost as vulnerable as Paris and London and New York? I mean, why aren't you? I mean, I think you told me, or you sent by email, you said that We do not have guaranteed electricity all the time, which was, I think that was, or at least, is that in the city or in the suburbs?
It's everywhere, the entire country.
That's blind. That's amazing. So that is important, that you can't really run a full-on techno control grid if you don't.
No, you can't.
No.
In South Africa, we will never get onto that 15-minute city control grid anytime soon because it's just too chaotic.
Yeah.
Right here underneath my desk, I've got backup power just in case the main power goes out.
Right. Yeah. No, okay. That's important. So you've got there are some attractions, many attractions.
Yeah, well, but that's exactly right. So when you have an inept government, a completely useless state, it forces you into a mindset of prep, into a mindset of self-reliance.
Yes. No, I really like that. I'm going to mention it to both the girls again because I said, look, you're here because you were born here, and that's our fault. You know, you don't really love it here, and it's awful, isn't it? And it's getting worse. So,
but I mean, to be fair, I'm not suggesting you move here. I'm simply asking when you come in to visit, and more specifically, come to the Kruger National Park, and I'll go with you.
I'm not. I don't think that, as it were, running safety is. It's not really for me. I don't think. I don't know. I also think the end comes at some point. I wouldn't say I don't really mind. You know, if it happens to happen tomorrow, or if it happened in 25 years, it's not that important. I've had a lovely life. I'm still enjoying it. If it ended tomorrow, it would be all right. So, you know.
Well, just so that we're clear, you say you have a lovely life, but the last few years, you are one of the pivotal people, at least in my life, who had positive impact.
Yeah.
My child who was born a year ago, just under a year ago, is not vaccinated thanks to people like you.
Good. Fantastic. And there's no reason ever to, and as you know, no reason ever to feel any guilt. Did I leave them unprotected? No, I didn't realize until relatively recently that that's all just a story. The whole thing is just a story. Contagion. So, But anyway, I think we'll...
Okay, so, Mike, let's come in for a landing. Give me the moral of the story.
God, the moral of the story. What? Which story? You might want to provide some, or at least a possible structure. Oh, which story?
Well, okay, what is the moral of your story? The moral of your story.
Yeah. I think for me, I feel quite strongly about this. If you have an opportunity to do something that's good for other people, you should damn well do it. Because I sense it must be true that a large number of people could have helped and didn't, and they could help now and aren't. And I think we could roll them over. People who have information, they're not going to hang, draw, and quarter you if you say, I detected this lie. You know, this is unequivocally a lie, and I'm going to tell everybody I know, even if they laugh at me. Do it. Plant the seed. It does work. There's a friend of mine who's made QR codes of the video I made before the one that just was released. It's called so-called Silver Bullet. And he'd written it, COVID was a big lie, is in English, then the QR code, and they've appeared all around the world. Every now and again I get a picture from a bus stop in Bogota or something, or someone sent a picture from I think it was the highest point in a Swiss ski resort recently. They took a picture and there was one of COVID is a big lie QR stickers on the roof of this thing. And that does fill me, but I actually get quite a lot of joy out of that, because it's not just what I did, it's that other people saw we can do something that could make a difference here. That's all it takes. Enough of us. So if you can do something good, do it.
Mike, how can I follow you?
Well, I can answer that. I've got two locations due to good friends of mine. I probably would have just crumpled in a heap because I'm not very good with social media, but I use Telegram, Telegram, and you can find me on Telegram, but you must look out for the channel that says Dr. Mike Yeadon Solo. You'll know it's me because it starts with a video saying, this is my channel and this is the title of the channel, Dr. Mike Yeadon Solo. All of the others won't have the video. they may have my picture and my name, but they're fake, and there's at least 2 or 3 others. So that's one. And then the other one is Substack, where as yet there are no fakes. But if you go to the Substack, one word, SUB stack, Dr. Mike Yeadon. I don't write very many pieces on the Substack, so I think each of the small numbers that are there are quite powerful. So if you are approaching me or recommending someone approach me for the first time, probably Substack first, just sort of read the articles, because they're not that long and they cover probably all of the material I've covered at some point has been covered in words, that are easy to comprehend. Whether you believe it or not, it's up to the reader, but that's where it is. And that's where I reside mostly, because Twitter still doesn't like me. YouTube doesn't like me, even when I'm logged in as a pseudonym to do with my bike hobby. It knows damn well who I am, even with a VPN on. And so if I write something, it doesn't like it, and I refresh the screen, it's gone. So that is still continuing in year 6, but I don't mind anymore. I just go places where that doesn't happen. But just to remind people that the censorship of the people they don't want you to hear from is just as strong as ever. And as that little meme goes, there's a 2-frame meme. Who is it that's telling the truth? And the other one is the people that are being censored are telling the truth. That's right. So why would people censor me? Early in 2020, it could be because I was talking nonsense and could have put people's lives at risk. But it's 6 years on. They're still censoring me because I'm telling you things that they don't want you to know. I also point out that if you search for me using, I don't know what the right terms are, search engines, browsers, what is Google Chrome? What category of thing is it?
That would be a browser.
Browser. So if you put Dr. Mike Yeadon in Google Chrome or Apple, is it Safari? And then there's
Safari.
a Microsoft Edge, is it? I don't know. No. Anyway, if you use any of the big ones, just click return and just scroll down and have a look at a couple of pages. See what kind of material it returns, because mostly it's Yeadon's a conspiracy theorist, and here are some nasty articles from Reuters to tell you how wrong he's been. If you put the same search term in a small browser, and the one I use a lot is Yandex, Yandex, gives a completely different set of hits. And I put it to people in conversation that, do you regard search as a sort of generic property of the internet? And they go, what do you mean? I say, well, if you put the same search term in any of these different windows, it should give you roughly the same information. They go, yeah. I said, well, that's what I thought too. So if I give you an example that does not conform to that, what would you make of it? And they often don't know. And they have to tell them. I'm saying, someone's dicking with the results. And they're selectively dicking with the results, because if you put in uncontroversial terms, they all return the same thing. I've done the experiment repeatedly. So if you put in my name, I get very different search results in the mainstream browsers from what I get in the other ones. And if I use uncontroversial terms, they're all the same. So in a way, that's proof, I think. But that's only any good if someone is willing to be persuaded that I am being censored, and therefore probably has something dangerous to say. So, yeah, there you go. But, yeah, keep on keeping on, Jerm. I think that's all I would say, both to you, my friend, and anybody who's doing the same.
Well, on that note, Mike Yeadon, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
It's been great fun. Again, thank you.